What follows is the first session of the workshop at the beginning of the school year in September. The first session focuses on our contracting work, as I try to model for the participants how one clarifies purpose, clarifies role, how one tries to find a connection between what the people are bringing to the workshop and what the workshop has to offer. This is modeling exactly how they begin in their first classes, where they face similar challenges. The first example that's presented in this workshop, in the problem swapping, sharing of examples, has to do with challenges to the instructor's authority. The instructor being a PhD student, relatively new to the subject area, taking over after a very experienced teacher has taught the course. Also, we talk about some of the difficulty in connecting some content, for example, research, to student interest, and some of the anxieties that underlie students' concerns and feelings about taking research courses. We also have an example of dealing with large classes, or large, and in one case, a smelly classroom, which at the beginning becomes a real problem, but by the end of the term becomes a standing joke for everyone in the class. And finally, some discussion of difficulty in discussing hot topics, such as sexual orientation, religion, abortion, etc. I make a general presentation of the orientation that we'll be using throughout the course of the workshop. So this first session really sets the stage for the sessions that will follow. Let me take a couple of minutes just to describe how the workshop went, and then we could start with some of the problem swapping. And I know there are people right now I've talked to, in this case Christina, maybe others, who have some issues that they'd like to address right away, right? Yeah. Having gotten an emergency telephone call this afternoon. Right?
I feel much better already.
Do you?
I should have saved the phone call till later. I didn't know.
But the focus is on teaching practice. It's not on some of the areas of teaching that are often done in workshops like this, such as preparing syllabus, lecture style, etc. It's more on trying to understand the processes that go on in a classroom. And also trying to, because of the parallel process, recognize how much the way we teach students says to them about what we think about working with people. And this is a school of social work. But a lot of what we talk about would relate to other fields as well, certainly social sciences and other professional fields as well. So we focus on method. What is it the classroom teacher says and does as he or she works with the class around the kinds of problems that emerge? And I'll give you some examples in just a few minutes. We also believe, and I believe, the assumption is that even though you're teaching very different courses, research, delinquency, human behavior, practice, etc., that there's a common core to teaching and issues that cuts across all the courses. Obviously, a first session in a research class may look a little bit different than a first session in a practice class, but the commonalities about beginnings and first class sessions and what instructors need to pay attention to are the same. And I think folks who participated last year, and many of you were there, it didn't matter which class was being presented, we could all get something out of it because we were able to pull the unique aspects. I think we also found similarities and differences between BSW and MSW. Both similarities and differences. So we were able to, and first year and second year, introduces variations on the theme, even in the master's program. A third assumption is that we use examples. And if you had a chance to look at the paper, those were some of the kinds of examples that people presented that we worked on. It's not group supervision. What we're using is examples and illustrations that can speak to everyone in the workshop. And so even though you're not facing that initial problem right then, you can pull from that concepts and ideas that might be helpful to associated or related issues, or when you do inevitably have to face the problem. So examples, illustrations were, for the number of years I've been doing this now for 8 years here, they always are the lifeblood of the workshop. It brings us close to the day-to-day realities, so it's not a theoretical workshop. Finally, there's a recognition on my part that I'm teaching, so that you watch me closely, and more is caught than taught, in my view. So I try to practice what I preach. Sometimes we reflect on what's going on in the workshop as a way of understanding a teaching-learning group process a little clearer. It's not an encounter group. You're not asked to share intimate details of your early childhood history. There are no touchy-feely exercises, although you're on your own. You're on your own after 6 months, But we can learn something from how this seminar works. In fact, I happen to believe, and I think some of the other people who were here last year will agree, that's some of the most powerful learning, is experiencing, in effect, a mutual aid support educational system, which is what this really is. A way in which people struggling with similar issues can be helpful to each other. Our issues happen to be teaching. In a research class, the issues may be fear of statistics. So there are a lot of different issues, but the support that people can get from each other in a classroom is crucial. Does that make sense as an introduction? Let me just throw out a few of the kinds of examples, and then let's open up the table for others. This is an organizing session, so we won't deal with everything today. We'll pick some that relate to the beginning phase, and let me comment on that just before I do that. We structured the workshop and the teaching and learning content around phases. So that at the beginning we looked at what was it like in first classes. What are some of the issues we're facing right now as we start to engage students or try to engage students. We then looked at issues in the middle phase, just as we did with practice. What are some of the dynamics that created? And that was also the middle phase for us. And then we continue. Second semester we go to one a month instead of 2 a month. We continued. Got your seat right there. That's right. We continued by starting to make the transition to endings. There were special issues, special dynamics that took place as you brought the class to a close. And once I get a chance to look over the tape, those of you who were not here last year, if any of you are interested in seeing the tape of our last session, I'll be glad to make it available to you. I thought it was a very powerful and helpful session at the end, dealing with some of the most difficult issues that faculty face around grading, use of authority, failing people, you name it. So that's the model that we use. What are the examples that came up? Let me just throw a few out. You're teaching a research course and you begin the first class and you're sitting there looking with a whole bunch of absolutely scared, crazed, out of their minds students. They can't even get the introductions out. And you know right away that they don't see a connection between what you're teaching and what they really want to learn. They didn't come to social work to learn how to talk chi-square. They came to social work to learn how to work with people, and they don't see a connection. We also find, as we did last year, that many of them are intimidated. And so part of the lack of connection is they've been taught, sometimes in a sexist manner and other times in different manners, that they're not going to be capable of understanding this. And so an obstacle emerges right in the very beginning. Challenges to authority came up, and will come up again. We're not finished with any of these issues. It's your first time you're teaching, and we've got examples where people took over, like the week before or 2 weeks before, from a very popular teacher who taught that course. Everybody signed up to have that teacher, and they get you. And in the very first class, it was clear that your own anxiety about being the second choice, plus when they look at you and say, so you know a lot about practice, don't you? And you realize what they're really raising is, are you going to be competent? And it touches our own anxiety around competency. It often raises what we call, or I call, the authority theme. Issues in the beginning that are between the instructor and the class. Issues that need to be addressed, because if they stay under the surface, they come up and they become major obstacles. We talked about things like students who never talk. And we go back to that. I don't think we did enough on that. How do we help students get engaged? A first class where you want a conversation to take place. You want people to be actively involved. And you hit that moment of absolute silence when you say to yourself, why didn't I bring a videotape? Something, anything to get the class going. And you feel like you're sinking deeper and deeper. So some of the authority theme issues of class culture. How do you develop a class culture where people, for example, feel free to take you on so that every word you speak is not written down? You said frimajig, they'd ask you how to spell it. You know, you want them to engage with the ideas. You want them to feel free to disagree with you. You'll have students in your class, we have them all the time, who have more experience than you. They're coming back to school, you know, and they've been out there in the field. And right away, they start with an attitude that almost conveys, let me have my ticket of admission. I'm only here to get my MSW so I can get promoted or more money or whatever's going to happen. And yet they don't really understand, because even though they've had supervision, they've never had the kind of supervision they should be getting in the School of Social Work. And they've never really looked at their practice in that way. But it's going to take a while to overcome that in the beginning. Individual students, we've talked about those. Silent members, I already mentioned. How about members who never stop talking? Monopolizes. You know, the kind who once they get going, half the class starts rolling their eyes. You're rolling your eyes, and you're the instructor. You know? And it's the student in your class who always gets going, but gets going on another tangent, and you don't even see a connection to what the class has been talking about. Or the second year student, you watch he or she sitting there, and as the students come in, since they're second year, they've been there before, they see him, and in their eyes, you know they're saying, can I get another class at this time? Because they've already had a year's experience with this guy or this woman, and they're anticipating it to be a problem again. The deviant member, the person who gives you the hard time or who always disagrees or is always challenging. I argued last year, and I'll try to argue again this year, that the deviant member is often experienced as your enemy when very often they're your ally. And if we understand our classes as dynamic systems, then the behavior of this deviant member takes on a whole different meaning, for us. Often a signal of an issue that has to be addressed. We say if they'd only drop the class, but if they drop the class, someone else takes their place. It's not like your class had a meeting before over lunch and said, look, we're going to need a deviant member in her class. Anybody? Hey, I can do it. I did that at home. I did that at work. I did it at school. You got it. It's not quite like that, but that's the approach we took to roll in the class. And just as it was helpful to us in understanding it in family and group practice, it's also helpful in stepping back and understanding role in the class group and how that can speak to us as instructors. The last thing I'll mention, taboo and difficult topics. You create a class. I just started a class, Interventions 1. They bring into that class a culture. It's a culture that they've experienced outside. Certain things are taboo. Hard to talk about. Sex, race, sexual orientation, class, you name it. And they have learned sometimes from hard experiences that you shouldn't say anything. It's better not to say anything rather than to make a mistake and say the wrong thing. It's like walking on eggshells. But nevertheless, you have a class where in the very first class somebody comes in and makes a statement that sounds to everybody in the class like it's sexist or racist or ageist or you name it. And you can see the rest of the class responding, but nobody's going to address it. How does the instructor address it and yet not turn the class off completely so nobody feels safe to say things that are not acceptable in social work? Am I making sense? Or you have an argument in the class that has a tinge of race. I just had one in the class where someone said she was working in a prison. She's white, young, suburban, working with prisoners who are all in their 30s or 40s, all black, sex offenders, you name it, and she can't understand them. And she's saying in class one of the problems was they were speaking in what they called Ebonics. And 3 or 4 of them agreed to meet with her to help her learn. Well, there's a black student in my class right there. I could see her back get up. She said, what do you mean, Ebonics? Well, we had to, right at that point, address the issue that she was taking offense because of the way Ebonics had been used in a degrading way, which was not exactly what the student was raising. She was raising it as something that the people in the prison were raising with her. So it had to be addressed right away. Otherwise, it gets under the surface and it works its way more and more powerfully. So interethnic issues, that means you're working across race, across gender, across sexual orientation, class, you name it, and intra-ethnic issue, working with people like you, which can be just as complicated as inter-ethnic. Does that give a sense of some of the kinds of things we covered, but we will come back and cover again probably in a different way? Okay, then let's take I'm really making an agenda for the whole workshop, not just for today, obviously. It's going to take some time. Let's open up for some what I call problem swapping. Let's see if we can identify a few of the things you're bringing in, what you'd like to see you get out of the workshop, and let's see if we can work out the timing so we work on at least one, so you get a feel for what the work is like, once we do get our teeth into an issue. Who wants to jump in? And don't let the camera intimidate you with the possibility that you may be seen on CDs all over the United States. Don't let that bother you at all.
I was actually hoping for a photo shoot.
Turn your best side.
Anybody? I won't. Go ahead. Great. Go ahead. Robin, go ahead.
I guess one of the things that just came up this year with me, in teaching a social work course, I'm really used to smaller classrooms, or at least so you can recognize faces. And for the first time in the 4 or 5 years I've been teaching, I walked into my intro class and it was this big lecture hall. And I don't know if this is good or bad. At first I thought, well, I can't do this. I need to know their names. I need them to sit close to me. And the second day that I went in, I thought, well, I'll give this a shot because aside from asking for another classroom, and I just think it's really important, like the setups of your room. It really makes a difference in teaching, because what I've found myself doing is I'm completely detached from the students in that class, and I lecture. I do less of the engaging the students.
And because of the size of the class, there are more students than usual, as well as a physical structure?
There's more students than usual, but there's only 39. I just think it's because they're spread out.
That's a lot.
Only 39.
39.
Do you guys mind moving back a little from Kelly on down, just to open it up a little so people can see people when they talk? Because I think right now that Robin was a disembodied voice, at that point. Go ahead. And I think we're okay here because you're a little further back.
But that's something new that I'm dealing with. I'm not sure how this semester's going to play out, so that's just an issue I wanted to throw out.
Go ahead, Marcia, jump in.
Actually, the fact that you raised that, I was put in, my first class ever, and I had a lot of people sign up for it. It was listed to be in this building. And then in August, all of a sudden on the course schedule, my class is now at South Campus.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I was stunned, and I actually was at South Campus and went and checked out the room I was assigned, and it's this big tiered room with stationary rows of chairs, that go way back, and very rigid formal structure. And I thought, this is not only really intimidating to me, it's going to be intimidating to these students who don't want to be here anyway with research. And
research in the South Campus.
Yeah, and at the South Campus. When they had signed up for the North Campus, by the time the first class came, I had lost quite a few students who did not want to go to South Campus. Yeah. They had already transferred. So when I went to the first class, I thought, I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know if anybody will be there. But there were some people there, and I had to address the physical environment right away, and this is where last year helped me. I acknowledged immediately the problem with the change to South Campus, that for all of us this was like a surprise.
Put it right out.
I put it right out up front right away. I talked about the structure of the room, and I tried to kind of put it out there and say, well, at least we have a beautiful campus, and we have better parking, and you might be close.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
You might be close to home when you get out of class. That's a big one. But so everybody said, we'll give it a try, but I very consciously planned that discussion based on what we talked about last year. I immediately addressed the structure. It did seem to help.
Sure.
And I have to say, I don't know what will happen in the future, but the second class, nobody left. And I really did expect, some people just didn't want to travel down to South Campus because they're here in the morning, and then they have to go there in the afternoon.
A basic issue that Marcia's addressing was the point that we all felt during the year, which is that issues that stay under the surface increase in power. Right. And sometimes, even though you can't resolve it, you can't move the chairs in that room, just surfacing it helps. We could talk a little bit more too, Robin. I think it's a good example you're raising about what it does to you when you walk in. You suddenly see a large class, a setup different from you want. I mean, you could address it, but what does it do to you? What Robin's telling us, it made her tend to lecture more. That's interesting. Yes. Let's go back and say, what is it about a larger class or that kind of physical thing that makes you tend to lecture when you've had experience and in the past have wanted to get conversation going? And not only how can we address it with the class, but how do we help the class take some responsibility for it? Because it's not just yours.
I thought it was interesting when Robin got done saying how she felt about that classroom situation. You asked those people to move back and said that she seemed like a disembodied voice.
Yes.
And that's like exactly what the classroom experience
was. Well, I meant to do it earlier. I got carried away, and then suddenly Robin's giving me an example about rows and rows, and I'm looking at this side. I say, well, we can do something here. We might not be able to do something in a large lecture hall, and I understand a large class, but my largest 1,200 field instructors at NYU with an auditorium down below and a balcony on top, and a field instructor presenting an example of a problem. These were all the field instructors for the New York area, of a problem around issue of inter-ethnic, which is race. And an African-American woman who's a field instructor stands up all the way in the balcony. Luckily, she had a big red hat. You couldn't miss her. And starts to give advice to the person in the lower level. And we get a dialogue going. And I'm sitting there saying, I can't believe this. And I teach this. And there it was. I asked them to pretend they were a small group. And because you asked them to pretend and you believe they're a small group, not a big group, there's no difference. Let's use Robin's example to talk about how in a large group, even in a bad setting, you can still treat that group differently. A part of it is, of course, raising it right at the beginning. We had other examples. Last year, who had the room the sweaty room, right? A sweaty room. I know the feeling. If you've ever been in Baldy Hall in one of those rooms, I had to sit through a whole semester with heat, sweat, and smell, But it had to be at least addressed. And somehow it became something people could work through. So physical structure, size of the class, things that throw you in the first class that you weren't expecting. What else? Let's get a few more. Yeah, please, Rebecca.
This is actually, I'm not sure we can address this here, but
Try.
I teach a course over at Canisius in the special education department. And it's a family collaboration class, and there's never more than, let's say the most is 17 in the class. And I am an extremely hands-on person, and it makes me very nervous to think of just standing and lecturing. That's an awful thought to me. So I'm extremely, we do lots of small group stuff, interactive kinds of stuff. And I had several students at the last end of the spring semester say, you need to be less social worky. We want you to come in here and we want you to lecture. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, well, then I'm not the one for you. But I'm thinking to myself, is there a point where that just gets too much? And I think, again, I'm teaching now in the fall here, and that's still my style, is to be very interactive group. I just think that that's the way people learn best, and maybe it's because that's the way I learn best. But it made me step back and kind of say, okay, they're wanting more of like a differential, like a power differential. They're wanting lecture. They're wanting to sit back. They're not wanting to engage. And I didn't really know how to take it, truthfully.
But I think you took it hard, because at the end of the semester to have something like that dropped on you is difficult. The other issue Rebecca's raising, which may be the hint for this semester, is they waited the whole semester to say it. So what do we do early in the game to create the atmosphere and the culture where if people have a complaint like that, they'll raise it during the term? Not doorknob therapy. Everybody know what I mean? The last thing the students say as they're leaving. And this may be the way we can start thinking about how to start this term in a different way around the authority theme. You want to jump in, Diane?
Oh, well, I wonder if it could be similar to an experience that I had where I was teaching a section of human diversity, and which is very experiential the way that I teach it. And one semester, though, this group of students, I think they wanted me to be less, touchy-feely, less social worky, but I think it was, so we talked about it, and I think it was, they didn't see, they wanted more of a balance, I think, between content and, between sort of theoretical content and digging in. And I think they were feeling like I was opting too much for the experiential, self-reflective, digging in kind of stuff, and not giving enough theoretical content. So I just wonder if that...
One of the things we found last year, and I think you're putting your finger on it as well, Diane, is that same statement could mean something quite different in different classes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could mean something quite different during the time of year. It could mean something quite different to graduating students as the students at the end of the first year. So when we look at these examples, I'd love to, I think they're right on target, we ought to get a little bit more detailed. One of the problems is we always assume that statement means the same thing. And it could mean something quite different. It could mean we're feeling uncomfortable. We need to spend more time on our discomfort that's being raised. It could mean...
I think it was the culture, that the culture of the department there is much more lecture format, and I'm outside of the department from a different perspective.
You are too social worky.
And I
Well, but you don't know.
am a social worker.
Listen, I really do empathize with you. I used to coach my kids' baseball teams. You just brought back a memory. And when my youngest son, who's now 37, was 13, I was coaching his team, and we had a very terrible loss. It was just a sad loss. So close, and we could have moved on. We could have been champions. And we lost. And so I got the kids in a circle, and I said, I know you're all upset. Let's talk about it. My son's standing on his side. You're not going to social work the team, are you? Okay, that's it. He needs a new coach next year. I can't. Meanwhile, the kids said, yeah, we want to talk about it. You know. So I'm very sensitive to this issue of social working. But we also need to look at what does it mean. For my kid, it meant I'm ready to have some other adult coach. That's what it really meant. Because it's too embarrassing for me to have my father still coaching. Your statement might be totally different meaning. And one of the things that gets interesting in the workshop is we try to explore what are some of the different meanings that same statement is, so that we don't respond ritualistically to one comment and instead explore it further. Because there is a different meaning. I have a hunch there could be different meanings in both of those comments. So good, I've got that down. Diane, I'm putting yours down also, okay? Because if that's okay, I'm going to link it with Rebecca's, because I think you are raising an issue about this emerging in a class on oppression, wasn't it? Yeah, and I think a statement in that class may be quite different than a statement in your class. That carries certain baggage from previous experiences. You know, so I'm going to put it down, even though you didn't offer it as an example. We may want to come back to it if you come back. Okay.
There's a touchy problem that I've dealt with in the past. That's
and Jennifer, if you don't mind, so they can hear you. Yeah.
There's a touchy problem that I've dealt with in the past that has to do with subtle and not so subtle attack against my orientation. You know, and I don't really. I've addressed it as they've come, but I don't always feel like I've got a formula for it.
Say some more about it. Will you say that? Orientation.
I had sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation. Okay.
I had a student, a very obviously born-again Christian student, write a paper about how lesbians are going to hell.
Great.
And no actual attack, you know, no you in there, but as close as you could get to it. You know, she was a bright student, smart, capable of the work and everything, and understood the material from everything that I could tell. And so I passed her. You know, I gave her an A on the paper, didn't let her have that mileage on me. She'll have to go to the next instructor and let it be. But I don't know if I really, I don't know where I stand on how much of that to take on and how much not, and when you're the authority person.
Well, the other thing you're raising, Jennifer, which was a theme all last year and will be this year as well, is that we can't separate personal from professional. That even though we were taught to do that, I was anyway. You know, I'm a social worker, so I should take my professional self and leave my personal self home. It doesn't work that way. That really the skillful job is to take personal and professional and integrate them. So that comment at the end of the term, hurtful. That comment, hurtful. This comment, particularly hurtful, because it attacks you as a person. First semester, second semester, third semester, fourth semester. When was the student giving that comment, that paper?
Oh, dear.
Was it the beginning of their social work training?
Their social work training, about halfway.
See, the reason I'm raising that is that the same statement from a student in a class in the first semester means one thing. If that statement comes out from a student in a paper or class in a fourth semester when they're ready to graduate, it means something else.
Oh, I was thinking class, not year.
Yeah.
That was their first semester.
First semester, understand? So a statement like that, and I'd love to look at it further if we can, we should put it on the agenda, is an opportunity to explore what is the student doing with that paper. Is that student attacking us, or is that student saying to us, in effect, Jennifer, I come from a background and a culture and a religion that has this orientation and point of view about people who are gay. Everybody I relate to has that point of view. The small town I came from had that point of view. Before I graduate, will somebody address it with me? That's a different statement than somebody who at the fourth semester is getting ready to graduate and says, School of Social Work, you didn't touch me, and I'm going to leave with a whole set of values. You understand? Then a gatekeeper issue comes up. Am I making sense on the difference? I said last term, and I'll say it again, I'd much rather have that student put that out in the first class or first classes, although I got to work real hard to help the culture of the class deal with that, than have it under the surface and let them go through 2 years of the school and it never gets addressed. The example I gave last year was the student who makes in this case it was could have been considered racist comment, and you could see the rest of the class something about he came from, I was in Boston, I think he came from Philadelphia. No, he came from Boston. He came from the south side of Boston. And I don't know if you folks know about the south side of Boston. It has a little history of racism. Just a little. Busing school, you remember that? And he makes this comment, and I can see people roll their eyes. I had to say to them in the first class, and we'll get back into this later. I have to tell you, I don't agree with what you say just now. And I think a good part of the class just rolled their eyes and turned off. But it takes a lot of guts in your first social work class to make a comment like that directly when you know it's not going to be well received. At least you were honest. Understand the importance of that? Because I don't want the rest of the class sitting there saying, now what ideas do I have that I'm unable to share because they may not be correct. Now, again, if he says that in the first class, I take that as he needs some work. And he wants some work because he comes from a family, and he did, a family in the community where race was seen differently. In the last class, then I have to say somebody missed this guy, and how did he get through 3 semesters to the point where he's about to graduate? Is this making some sense about the approach we would take? Depends on the subject, depends on the time, it depends on, but it's always monitoring what it does to us, because there's no question it's going to have a powerful impact on us. Can we keep that as one of the examples? Sure. I think it would be a great one. Please, yeah. Did you raise your?
Oh, no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Larry.
That's Melissa. Let me just get Melissa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to follow up on that. Teaching advocacy and policy. I don't know how to put this, but as social workers, we've kind of signed on to certain ideals, certain things to advocate for, and in teaching that, when people don't necessarily agree, I've had some problems in class with that. And it's worked out okay because I've allowed people to kind of talk about what they wanted to talk about and
But for example, what would be an example, Melissa, of a policy that you think is shared by social work in general, or a point of view about whatever? What would be an example?
Women's reproductive rights.
Abortion. Right. But why don't you pick a tough one instead of an easy one?
And, I had a person in my class who was pro-life. And I allowed people to debate. I mean, I thought it was very useful and very helpful. But people were saying to him, how can you counsel somebody as a social worker for pro-life? And I kind of didn't know what to do with it. I just let them work it out. And that's
wonderful example. It'll be a great one to come back to because there's 2 issues. See, sometimes we see things just as a specific issue, but they're often specific examples of a larger issue. Yeah. And this is a specific example that guy is raising, or woman is raising, about how my religious or other points of view is going to affect how I work with clients. You tell me there's anybody in the class that doesn't have that issue? Maybe not about abortion.
Or in this room.
Or in this room. In other words, we all have some of that issue. So the question is, how do we deal with the specific case, but also how do we generalize this so every student in the room can learn? They'll be spending the rest of their professional life trying to sort out personal views and practice. And the question that they ask is a good one. How do I help somebody deal with an issue of an unwanted pregnancy if I have strong religious and other beliefs about whether that's appropriate or not? That's a good practice question, but it's a subset of a lot of practice questions. Am I making sense on that? We're really just trying this first session to give a feel for the work of the workshop, and we will come back to visit these examples and issues as illustrative examples, plus others that may come up. Because we have a short time. We only had this time, but it turns out to be the best time for most people, and so that's why we're doing it. So you consider this the engagement stage of this workshop, the beginning, to identifying what our work is going to be, beginning to get some feedback on the types of examples or the issues. That's what this really is. Got someone just before you, Diane? I got Elaine.
I just wanted to tie in with what Diane said and what Jennifer said, that with another issue. In my undergraduate courses, I am very strongly addressing the issue of diversity, especially right now at this part of the course, racial diversity. And because I think it has to be done and it's important to me to do it. And I'm a little nervous that maybe I'm pushing it too hard. The classes that I'm teaching are 98% female and 99.9% white. So
real diverse group.
Yeah, real diverse. So I'm a little nervous, and then maybe it ties in with engagement at the beginning of the semester and trying to develop some safety for the class to respond. So there's not a lot of feedback. So I don't know how to read that. Is that because I'm pushing it down their throat and they want to tell me to shut up? Or because they don't feel safe to talk? I'm confused and concerned.
One of the things we tried to do is challenge the notion that because we speak, people hear, understand, integrate, and remember. It's marvelous. It's a myth that was created early in our lives. We all experienced this. Yeah, there's that. We know. So the question really becomes, how do I know what I'm saying is having any impact? Are people engaging in it? Sometimes when they're fighting it, that's a good sign they're engaging it because it's touching home, even though we may not like to hear it. So how do we make the classroom learning real? Not just what I call an illusion of work, where we go through the motions, students say what they think you and other students want to hear, and nobody gets touched. And we deal with such powerful issues. I don't know how, for example, you could right now be dealing in a class that doesn't that touches on issues of race and gender, race, gender, and class, without looking at what's just happened with this hurricane. My God, if this country had this thrown right into our face, it did. So another issue is, how does one deal with large traumatic events that affect our class? I couldn't teach a regular class the day after Kennedy was shot. It didn't make sense. There were people coming in with so much feeling about that. I had to address that. 9/11. But also, 9/11 was another example, but also how to connect that to the reason why the class exists. I'm sorry, Diane, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was also thinking about, and this isn't probably going to sound very coherent, but I'm interested in having conversations or getting some insight into how gender, sexual orientation especially, play out in the classroom. Mm-hmm. Because I have felt at times where, I think I'm a very great, responsive teacher.
No doubt.
I do make mistakes.
No doubt.
But I have felt like, students and women students have probably put in evaluations things that, and overall my evaluations have been good, but they put things in evaluations that I don't think they would ever say to a male teacher. Now, why do I think that? I don't know. It's just this very strong gut feeling. Mm. And I've also had lesbian students who I would expect to sort of be allies, because I engage in lots of ally behavior too, but who have, I think, acted out at me, sort of like I'm big bad lesbian mama or something, It's just like, and I don't know how to describe it really, but I have felt like, they're projecting something onto me that they would not project onto a male instructor or, a heterosexual female instructor. And I don't still quite have a good handle on that. I guess it's transference, countertransference in the classroom.
But you are raising interethnic students who are not gay or lesbian, who comment or relate to you in a way that is interethnic, but you're also raising one of the more powerful issues, which is intraethnic. I'll have to tell you, class after class, workshop after workshop, I've seen over the years thousands of people who are graduates of schools of social work. And they always say the school spent all the time talking about what it was like to be a white worker dealing with clients of color. And the students of color never get addressed what they're supposed to do when they come to an agency or see a client of color, and the client says, well, I'm glad I got you, because those white workers back at the agency, those crackers, they don't understand what it's like for us, brother. And you have just as powerful an issue, intra-ethnic issue, as interethnic, and it gets ignored.
Yeah, it's like getting all the gay
it gets ignored because we're so busy worrying about our white students or our male students dealing with we don't look at how the intra-ethnic can even be more powerful. I put that down too, Diane. I hope you continue with the workshop. You're raising wonderful issues that would be helpful for everyone in the room. Are the rest of you getting a sense that the kinds of stuff we'd be talking about hits home? You know, this is the kind of stuff you really struggle with, and unfortunately don't get a lot of help with. Go ahead, Robin. And then I got to wrap us up because some people have 6 o'clock classes, right? Does anybody have a 6 o'clock class? Well,
I can leave and you can keep going.
Well, it's about time. All right, then we can really talk.
I'm the only one.
Then we'll go to 6. I didn't know whether you had it or not. If you don't, great, we can do it. Go ahead. Sorry, Robin.
Just in addition, this goes with everything we've just been talking about, and particularly things around gender, sexual orientation. How do you fix, I guess, when you've responded to a student in a particular way, how do you fix that? I had a student who had an issue about 2 gay men adopting a child, and she came to me after class and she said to me, I can tell by the expression you gave me, which was like, are you for real? And I know the face I gave her, that wasn't a good thing I said. And she, she's a little older, and she said to me, this wouldn't have been normal. She's like, back in my day, and I don't know how you work with people like this. And then I felt bad, because I'm like, oh God, I gave her like such an unprofessional response. But just from teaching this content for so many years, I just gave her this like, pinch your face.
Well, let's look at formative evaluation, feedback you get in the class or outside the class. Let's also look at more formal evaluations. For example, midterm. Some of our best discussions last year came out of people bringing their midterm evaluations in here, and they weren't always positive, But the way in which we handled it was really where the skill came. Note also, I'll just comment on this, what I always get fascinated by is the parallel process. Here you have a student, right, who has views that she's inculcated in her family and her background. And she's coming to you and say, I saw that in your eyes. And you're wondering, how should you respond to that when you really felt in some ways you were putting it down and cutting her off? Well, isn't she going to have the same problem when she works with clients? Isn't she, through her eyes, her expression, her comments, indirectly maybe, not directly, convey to 2 gay clients her feelings about having them raising? So in some ways, the way you respond to her when they come and raise this question, it's going to be a good model for her in terms of how she responds to clients. Because she will have many times where her own personal values will come through in a way which she later regrets. Am I making sense at all, Robin? Everybody understand what I mean? The parallel process, it's fascinating. And you don't have to be teaching a practice class. You'd be teaching a research class, and you're still teaching people about how to relate in the way you teach the class. So how you respond to her at that point, how you handle a midterm evaluation, which you feel is unfair. People put into that evaluation comments they would never put in, say, with a male, or intra-ethnic issues. What you do in that class after that evaluation could be the best moment in the term. How you handle it. Unfortunately, when you're new to teaching, and most of you are, some of you are long-term teachers, been teaching for a while with a lot of experience, the time you feel most vulnerable. The time you feel most vulnerable is the hardest time to really start to open up and address these issues, to admit vulnerability. The same thing we try to teach our students to do with clients, to admit vulnerability. Yeah, and you've got to leave. Go. Don't let me hold you up.
Yeah, I was just saying, with that situation that Robin has had, when I've had that, I've sometimes gotten the permission of the student to go back to the class and open that
Yes.
up
Yes.
with the class.
Respectful. Yeah, that's respectful. Sure, the best learning can come, and what a model you make for your students. When you come back in and say, look, I got these midterm evaluations. You know, I don't think I really like everything that people said, but I think it's important for us to discuss it. And as we had last year, students in the class said, you're the first teacher who's ever come back to talk to us about our midterm comments, which was being respectful of the students' comments and offered an opportunity to work on the issues. Not just the faculty members, but because the students had responsibility as well. But again, when you're feeling vulnerable, you get a midterm evaluation, doesn't sound great, and your instinct is, I don't want to go talk about this with my class.
Call them sick.
Huh? What's that?
Oh, you want to call them sick.
You want to call them sick. Yeah. And yet, the experiences we had last year, it certainly was a turning point for classes. Absolute turning point.
I made a mistake, last class, just this last, what was it, 2 days ago, a day ago? Anyway, I was talking about Hurricane Katrina. And I was talking about, in terms of media, the media's role in logical fallacy, whatever, but we were talking about the media's role in overplaying some of the issues. And I said, I said something about it would be a shame that if the issues were turned into a race issue rather than sticking with the poverty issue, because I don't think as much will get done to help that way. And then I realized that there's race in there too,
Oh, yeah.
but I didn't catch myself fast enough, and I know that I have to go back in and correct that and stuff, and it's okay to go back in to correct that, but I hate it when I'm driving home and saying, damn, I missed that one.
I suggested last year when I said, then we'll close, we'll do a little evaluation tonight and wrap it up. I suggested last year, I say to every practice class I teach, that good teaching is learning how to shorten the distance between when we make a mistake and when we catch it. And that really good teachers may catch it the next class. Coming back to next class and saying, I was thinking about what I said at the last class, and I think that probably turned some people off, and didn't even come across the way I meant it. Let's discuss it. That's great teaching.
And I was just plain wrong.
And I was plain wrong. That's even better. And being able to catch a mistake in the same class is wonderful. So when you come back from the break and you say, I want to go back to what was raised, you asked that question at the beginning of the class, and I really dismissed it. I didn't ask you why you were asking that question. I wish I had. And suddenly, that question turns into a totally different and important question. What have you modeled? You've modeled wonderful practice where you go back and catch it in the same class. That, to me, is dynamite practice. I also believe we learn from mistakes. I don't think you learn if you don't make active mistakes. So I encourage you to take a risk, make an active mistake. You learn to do it. You do it differently. You make a more sophisticated mistake. And in this room, all of us, I include myself and Steve, are at different levels of sophistication in our mistakes. Understand? Depends how long we've been doing it, how much we've learned from our past mistakes, but we're always learning from mistakes. You can't stop learning. That's the key. I hope this semester gives you a whole lot of handle, and next semester, and ideas about how to do that learning, because you're going to be doing it for the rest of your professional life if you're going to be a good teacher. So you're going back next week, right? You have that class again?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. If you have it again, go back and re-raise it. Come back here and tell us how it went.
Yeah.
If you don't have the class, if it's gone, some of your examples are long gone, sign the painting, hang it up. Admire it. You like the color, the dimensions aren't bad, but you don't feel you have real depth there yet. You have to work on it. Next canvas. Don't spend a lot of time feeling guilty about what you didn't do in that class when you were often thrown into a class with very little help and very little support. And conversations with colleagues never got into the details that we're talking about here. If anything, they got into what a terrible class we had this year. Can you believe those students, how resistant they are? Which is not really helpful. So sign the painting, hang it up, admire it. You did better than you think. Next canvas, next class, or next session.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah. I really like that you said that.
Oh, I mean, that saved me. I have a practice text. It's been around for 20 years. It's in its 5th edition. I always have my students, I had it today. They say to me, we were role-playing a situation, and I gave an alternative way of dealing with an issue related to race and a parent. And they said, it comes out so easily when you say it. And I say, I've been practicing for 40 years. Wouldn't you be distressed if it didn't come out easily? Wouldn't that worry you?
Gives you hope.
But then, you know what I do then? I then give them the pages where they will find my first year Columbia University process recordings of my placement at the Mount Vernon Y, and it didn't come out easy. You understand? And so I want them to see this is a process that develops over time if you work at it. Good teaching is the same. Some comments about this for those of you who have been here last year. It sounds like we have revisiting some ideas, but revisiting them in new ways. Sounds to me. For those of you who haven't been here and you're joining us for the first time, what's your comments at the end of this first session? And again, this was a first session. It's a workshop, not a class, but there's similarities. Anybody have any comments? Go ahead.
I'm not new, but I want to say to the other PhD students who aren't teaching, I cannot tell you how helpful attending these workshops were for me last year before I was teaching. So I know you're not required to be here, but
they actually are, by the way.
earlier,
I've been told they are.
We are.
Oh, you are, but not them. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm just trying to encourage you, if you can, to participate, because it helped me a lot. I was very anxious about my first class. It helped give me some preparation and, all of that. And like I said, when I found out the physical environment and this horrible room I was going to
You were ready for it.
I did what I heard last year at the workshop, and it worked.
How about, Marsha, we get an infomercial? And we... I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
Telling them
I know.
Really, if you can, you should come. It helped. I'm not saying that I haven't already made some mistakes in 2 classes.
But you're more comfortable about making
But
it.
I expect to make mistakes, and I keep thinking after the fact, I could have done that differently and better.
Yeah.
But anyway, at least it gave me some reprieve from a lot of anxiety that I was feeling about beginning teaching.
And you're probably not alone. I think there are other people here as well. Other comments about this first session, just before we wrap it up? Anybody, how'd you find it? How'd you experience it? If it went well, what was it about the session that you think helped it go well? If there were problems in it, what were those? This is your chance.
Well, I've done these sessions with you before,
Right.
Larry, not last year, but before this.
Yes.
I have to say the camera does make a little bit of a difference.
Well, how much? How much? Is it going to be a problem for you?
I can live with it. I just have to learn to speak up.
Well, we'll get you.
And,
well, what about
there.
the rest? Is the camera a problem? I don't want the camera to be an inhibitor in the course. It's not worth it. But if we can keep it, if Steve can do maybe not all of these, but some of these, it'll provide a terrific fund of this. I'll tell you, the reason I got excited about it when you first raised this and this is that I'm getting close to the end of my teaching career, believe it or not. I know you can't believe it, but 68, I'm still trying to get over my Medicare card. Yeah. So one of the things that I got very excited about last year was, could we make a contribution that will pass this along?
I'm okay with it, Larry. I just, I get a little bit more emotional than I expect to sometimes.
Listen, I'm close to crying right now. Are you kidding?
So,
when I talked about passing it along, you didn't hear that in my voice?
Yeah, I
Listen,
hear you.
It'll come through. It'll come through. So if we can do it, I'd like to. But if it is a problem, say so. I don't want it to be an interference. And we can cut the camera at various points. If somebody wants to present something, prefer not to have that particular tape, Steve can cut the camera. And that's
that editing as well.
And we also can edit, and later on you can reflect back. But what I just think you just did today, if seen by new teachers elsewhere, would be the most encouraging thing in the world, to understand that what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, is not unique to them. It's universal, the people who start this practice. And the other thing we did, I'll just make it one more comment on it, is that I try to point out all year, how much more you knew about teaching than you realized. And for many of you, there was the need to take what you'd learned about practice and understand how to harness that to your teaching function, which is different than social work, to the educational purpose, which is different from counseling. And once you did that, once you realized you could take all of that stuff you learned, people had numbers of time where they realized an insight that what they had understood about, say, leading a group, working with a family, counseling, that really could be applied in class without turning the class into a therapeutic encounter.
That's true.
That was very important. So hopefully that will come through to you session after session as well. It'll give you more confidence. Do you want to say something, Diana?
I was just saying that I feel excited about the topics and the content and the process.
Good.
Here,
Anything about the process that you felt was helpful or particularly?
Well, All of it, I think.
Anybody? Just comment on the process of this very first session. What was it about it? Anything? Because you did open up quite a bit, I thought.
Well, I think it provided a culture that supported that.
Yes.
And on a very supported, kind of getting people to just share things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of an important way to begin, because it provides a guideline that, for people to share things in kind of a natural type of way.
That's why I always have in the first class an opportunity for problem swapping. I want students to hear that other students, whether they're experienced or inexperienced, are struggling with the same issues. And that's the culture of this class, that we share problems, not how perfect we are in practice. Okay.
I would like to say something, but I'm wanting the camera not to be on.
Can you mind, Steve? Yeah. Okay, last comment, Robin, and then we'll all leave. You got it back on, Steve? Okay. Yeah. What? Is that okay? Okay, cut it back off.
Take that one because I need to be out of town next week.
Well, we will. So next week we're agreed, this is important to have on the tape, next week we'll agree that the issue that has touched a whole lot of people around interethnic, race, gender, sexual orientation, the hot button issues ought to be something we focus on next week. And we'll do a little presentation and we use some examples. And again, if it's uncomfortable at some point and you want to share an example, do exactly what you need to. Just let Steve know. He won't be offended. Right, Steve?
Thank you.
Good. Hey, thank you. Great start. I love this stuff.